Hello everyone, now let us discuss how to name the muscles based on their characteristics. So, muscles based on their characteristics such as orientation, size, shape, principal action, number of tendons at the origin and anatomical location, they can be named accordingly. Now, first of all, let us see the naming of the muscles based on their orientation. That is, orientation of the muscle fascicles relative to the body's midline. For example, rectus. Rectus means parallel to midline. Example of the muscle is rectus abdominis. The next is transverse. Transverse indicates perpendicular to midline. Example of the muscle is transverse abdominis. Oblique. Oblique indicates diagonal to midline. Rectus means parallel to midline. Transverse means perpendicular to midline. And oblique means diagonal to midline. So, example of the muscle is external oblique. Now, coming to the naming of the muscles based on their size, that is relative size of the muscle. Name is maximus. It indicates largest. Example of the muscle is gluteus maximus. Minimus indicates smallest. Example of the muscle is gluteus minimus. Longest indicates long. Example of the muscle is adductor. Adductor longus. And brevis. Brevis indicates short. Example of the muscle is adductor brevis. Latissimus. Latissimus indicates widest. Example of the muscle is latissimus dorsi. And longissimus. Longissimus indicates longest. Example of the muscle is longissimus capitis. Magnum indicates large. Example of the muscle is adductor magnum. Major indicates larger. Magnum, major, both indicates large or larger. Example of the muscle is pectoralis major. Minor indicates smaller. Example of the muscle is pectoralis minus. Vastus indicates huge. Vast means huge. Vastus indicates huge. Example of the muscle is vastus lateralis. Now, coming to the naming of the muscles based on their shape, that is relative shape of the muscle. Deltoid indicates triangular shape. The example of the muscle is deltoid muscle. And trapezius indicates trapezoid shape. Example of the muscle is trapezius muscle. Serratus indicates sawtooth. Example is serratus anterior. And rhomboid indicates diamond shaped. Example of the muscle is rhomboid major. Orbicularis indicates circular. Example of the muscle is orbicularis oculi. And pectinate indicates comb-like. Example of the muscle is pectinate muscle. And piriformis indicates pear-shaped. Example of the muscle is piriformis. And platus indicates flat. Example of the muscle is platus. And quadratus. Quadratus indicates square, four-sided. Quadra means four. Square or four-sided. Example of the muscle is quadratus femoris. The next is gracilis. It indicates slender. Example of the muscle is gracilis. Now, coming to the naming of the muscles based on their principal action. The first one is flexor. Flexor indicates flexion. Flexion is to decrease the angle. So, flexor, it decreases the joint angle. Example of the muscle is flexor carpi radialis. It decreases the joint angle. The next is extensor. It increases the joint angle. Extension. The movement is extension. Example of the muscle is extensor carpi ulnaris. The next is abductor. Abductor means moves the bone away from the midline. Example of the muscle is abductor pollicis longus. Abduction means to move away. Next is adductor. Adductor means it indicates adduction. Move towards. Adductor muscle, it moves bone closer to the midline. Example of the muscle is adductor longus. The next is levator. Levator, it rises or elevates the body part. Levator, it rises or elevates the body part. Example of the muscle is levator scapulae. The next is depressor. It lowers or depresses the body part as the name indicates. Example of the muscle is depressor labri inferioris. Depressor labri inferioris. The next is supinator. Supinator, it turns palm anteriorly. It aids in supination. Supinator turns palm anteriorly. Example of the muscle is supinator muscle. Next is pronator. Pronator, it turns the palm posteriorly. It aids in pronation. Pronator muscle, it turns the palm posteriorly. Example of the muscle is pronator teres. The next is sphincter. Sphincter, it decreases the size of an opening. Sphincter decreases the size of an opening. Example of the muscle is external anal sphincter. The next is tensor. It makes body part rigid. Example of the muscle is tensor fasciae latae. The next is rotator. It rotates the bone around the longitudinal axis. Example of the muscle is rotator. Now, coming to the naming of the muscle based on the number of origins, that is number of tendons of origin. Biceps indicates 2 origins. Biceps indicates 2 origins. Bi means 2. Example of the muscle is biceps brachii, and triceps indicates 3 origins. Example is triceps brachii. The next is quadriceps. It indicates 4. Bi means 2, tri means 3, and quadra means 4. Biceps indicates 2 origin, triceps indicates 3 origin, and quadriceps indicates 4 origins. Example of the quadriceps is quadriceps femoris. Next, based on the location, that is structure near which a muscle is found. Example is temporalis. The muscle is found near the temporal bone, hence the name temporalis. The next is based on the origin and insertion, the sites where muscles originate and insert. Example is sternocleidomastoid, originating at sternum and clavicle and inserting on mastoid process of the temporal bone. These are some of the names of the muscles based on their characteristics. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for further videos on medical coding and CPC training.